Hello everyone, welcome to the ExCEED podcast from the Center for Entrepreneurship for Economic Development at Gokhale Institute. I am very happy today to have Mr. Kurush Irani, who heads the CSR of Bajaj FinServe. Welcome to you, and I'm looking really to having a very good discussion around, of course, what we are working on with persons with disabilities and how to empower them, but also around the great work that you have done around skilling. So this discussion is mostly going to be around that. Let me start off by asking you to talk a little bit about your transition from the non-CSR world to the CSR world and your experience of it. What do you see is different, and where do you see things need to be improved or where things are going well? Over to you.
Pradnya, thank you for having me over. It's a pleasure. I am new to the CSR field, just been over a year now. However, I have a team which is deeply rooted and they've been doing this work for a long time. And more importantly, the entire Bajaj group, their social work predates the CSR law by many decades. Right from the days of Shri Janganlal Bajaj. So I think that environment helps me. This 1 year has been smooth from that perspective. But prior to this, I think the 27 plus years of working before this has been all in financial services in different parts of the world, working on different areas of the business. So it's a very different change.
Correct.
From what the past experiences have been. It's a very positive change. Sort of I'm getting exposed to a different side of a solution or a problem to work on, which one was not exposed to earlier. It's more humbling because you realize that there is such a huge need and opportunity where all of us can play a role and contribute. So I think this just gives the platform from that perspective. And while the time has been limited, I think what has really stuck with me over this 1+ year is we're dealing with a lot of extremely high passionate people here. So the level of drive and passion for the cause is unparalleled. Don't see that uniformly on the business side, which is quite unique and common in this space. The type of problems being worked on are also very different and very unique. So it's very gratifying and humbling when one sees that. At the same time, what I also foresee is that typically on the business side, we always work towards how do you optimize things, how do you scale things, how do you take it larger. Here I see that as an opportunity because it's not done consistently. So some of the partners do it very well. Some are still in that journey, and for some it is difficult from their own capability or capacity perspective. And I think structurally one of the things that stays with me is while so many companies contribute to CSR, individuals contribute to philanthropy, the need is far exceeding whatever we can do, right? So what role can we play? Can we play the role of creating those flagships in a certain scope or space, which when proven successfully can then be scaled up by the right authorities or the right power be who can take it to that level? Because while we can keep scaling it up, the scope will possibly be limited, right? Because the CSR funds are about 1% of the total spend. So I think there are quite a few projects that we also work on, Pradnya, which are statistically being looked into from relevance, from impact being generated. And my hope is that as we make those cases with our partners, then we can take it to the responsible authorities and they can look into it in terms of how do we scale it up. And if I frame it differently, it's not about taking it afterwards, but actually working with them through the journey, right? Because it's important we work with them through the journey and then we take it up. And a lot of the work we're doing in education, in health, in skilling are those examples that can be taken forward.
Wonderful. No, that's a great insight. In fact, at my work with Deasra, there's always a view to scale, right? And one of the things we found is technology as an enabler really helps scale. So everything we do is do things on the ground prove it works, and then see how technology can be enabled.
Okay.
Perhaps that is one of the things. But here at CEED, we are looking at it again from a scale perspective, but from a research perspective, from a policy making perspective. Because a slight change in policy can make an impact on a huge number, a huge demographic. So the two together, one from an enabling side using technology, and from a policy making side to look at policies and making them relevant, and one change benefiting a large number, that's how we are looking at scale. So I think that's really aligns with what you are saying in terms of do something local and then try and see how to scale it. So you've been doing a lot of work in skilling, right? And that is really one thing that is required today for the youth to get into jobs, to get into other forms of livelihood as well. And my question to you is, because you've been doing it for so long, what has been your experience, both good and bad? What has worked in terms of skilling for youth to get into the pathways of livelihood, and what really hasn't worked, and how can enablers and policymakers help?
Sure. So you're right, we have been working in the skilling space, and in fact as a group we have made an announcement very recently of skilling being a primary focus and committing big funds as well as over an extended timeline what sort of impact we can make. If I share an example, so we run a program in colleges where we have created a program for final year college students to get them ready for the BFSI industry. Now this is an industry that is core to us. We understand this industry, we hire for this industry. So sort of we know the gap, that what we are hiring for versus what the college students come from. So we have created a program, we've been taking it to these colleges and training the final year, typically BCom students for it. It has been working well over the last many years. We keep revising the curriculum and training the students for that. What is, I think interestingly, what has helped change in the last few months is, and that's the whole point of scaling it as well as enablers and where the policy makers can make a role, right? So while we used to do this independently, now we have tie-ups with both AICTE and NSDC. Now this just opens up many platforms for us. So instead of going and talking to each college individually, using AICTE or UGC in the future, we get access to a whole breadth of colleges to share our program and to work with them to build it as part of the curriculum, which otherwise used to be an add-on, and getting that incremental time was always a challenge. As part of the same journey, we got this program as a credited program through NCVT. So now it's a 4-credit program. So students can now opt for this as part of their curriculum instead of something else. Gives them the hands-on knowledge as well as experience to make them aware and be ready for an entry-level position in this space. So this is one example to me for where using big platforms which enable the scale and using some policy level capabilities like getting the NCVT approval just builds it part of the curriculum.
Okay.
Similarly, Pradnya, we work with a whole ecosystem of partners, and they are imparting skilling at the community level, at the student level, typically for the underprivileged in deeper geographies for different types of skills. And players are of different types, smaller ones, larger ones, focused on maybe a certain niche or focus on multi-skill disciplinary areas that they work on. In that, I think one of the areas, because there are so many now companies also focused on skilling.
Right.
And skilling is one area where skilling people is relatively easy. But do you have demand for that skills, right? So that mapping of demand, because the last thing you want to do is to skill somebody, you're setting that expectation, and then there is no deployment of that skill, it is not solving for the challenge, right? So how do we map the demand to the skill that is going to impart it is one critical aspect. And that's where I think having more data insights at a local level, at a more getting it from the policymakers, where to invest in. And this may not always be about the high-end skills, right? A lot of these are about a segment of the society where you're looking for a lot of entry-level positions, trying to get them into basic jobs. And with technology coming in, some of these jobs could be at risk, right? So how do you find the right balance? So I think that's one area that I see an possibility for more traction from a demand side economics, and then how the skilling can play to it.
Great. So I know you've skilled a lot of youth, right? Where do you see the gaps are still between skilled youth getting into the industry, right, and doing well there? Are there gaps, or has that been sorted?
Sorted is that's an aspirational word. We're long away from that. It's a journey, right? And I think, and this is the scenario where you're seeing they're getting placed.
Yeah.
I think some of it is also coming down to what is the right expectations being set up front.
Okay.
Because one of the challenges we hear is of early attrition. And that's where there's a mismatch between what is the reality versus what the expectation is. So I think that creates one of the challenges, that are we setting the right expectations.
Okay.
Second, even if you're training for the hard skills, the equal proportion or larger part has to be on the soft skills in terms of integrating with the workforce. How do you work in a certain setup and so on. So I think the whole employability and the soft skill piece is has to get the required focus. I'm not very sure, but I think the third bucket we're seeing is a lot of our projects are typically in the big metros. So if you're doing it in the deeper geographies or tier 2, tier 3 towns, if it requires migration, readiness for that, and sometimes it's not, and a lot of our programs are focused towards the girls also. So it's not just their readiness, the family's readiness to let the girls travel. So again, it's all about expectations that are you willing to then maybe locate to a nearby town which is maybe 200 kilometers away. How will you adjust in that city if you're not lived there? What is your support ecosystem? And we're fortunate there are partners who actually even focus on that piece, that for the first 6 months, how do they keep in touch? How do they help them integrate? And then there's a breed of partners who are now working on how do we create opportunities which are more local, so that we don't work towards a migration aspect, but we create opportunities in the local environments. But these are pockets. These are not widespread.
That's great. So we are now collaborating to work with persons with disabilities and to see what are the challenges there in terms of having good opportunities set up, skilling to happen, and essentially self-sustenance, if you will, opportunities available for persons with disabilities. In that context, where do you see our things that are going well? Where do you see the challenges? And what is the end goal that you are envisioning for a person with disability?
This is a very tough segment, Pradnya. I mean, we have been working in this segment for the last few years. It's a wide spectrum. We have 40 plus partners that we work with. There are certain disabilities which are in your face, visible. But there are a lot of disabilities which are not so evident. Awareness is low in the first place. Awareness being low, hence the treatment is not there, or the way they are treated or socially accepted is very different. The spectrum is very large, right from physical disability to the specially able to the intellectually disabled. The spectrum is quite large in that place, and it involves treatments, rehabilitations, in some cases the right aids to enable them. It's about gearing up their parents and their ecosystem, how to deal with that. Education, inclusive schools, special schools, what works well. After a certain point of time, when they reach a certain age, what happens from their own livelihood perspective? As parents age, what is the role that they can play? And there are different people working in this segment, and again, highly passionate people. Common thread one sees is that a lot of them have some personal association with that, which is what makes it very real for them. So it's a wide spectrum. I think the project that we are working on is one example that even though we are working in different areas, one of the areas that we see is, while there are multiple government schemes, whether it is from funds available, health benefits available, jobs available, utilization is very low, right? And when you see that data by different states, you see huge variation. Even in a state like Maharashtra, it is below the national average. So then, and for a relatively better off state, why would that be the case for that same socio-economic segment? So that's where I think getting into the root of it, is it awareness issue? Are there processes? is there something we can enable from a ease perspective? And depending on what we find, again working with the policymakers, with the enablers, that how we can utilize. It's been made available. I think the whole Right to PWD Act which came in, the 21 areas defined, is a big step. How do we keep building on that and make access, make awareness and make utilization better is one direction. And then again for pockets, what can we do from a skilling perspective? How do we make them enabled to take care of themselves, find the right skills which work depending on their status and what type of jobs come in. And there are interesting avenues. We have a few examples where we're seeing great stories building up, smaller numbers, but we'll keep walking that path and taking it forward.
Can you tell one of the stories where this work?
I think if any of you visit some of the airports, if you come out of the Bombay airport, international airport, you'll find a kiosk there called Mitti Cafe. And it's a cafe selling coffee, food, completely run by people with disabilities. And we are partnering with them on some of them. But all of them are trained, they run the entire setup. And they do a fantastic job and it's also sustainable after the initial point of time. One of our partners works on cashew processing. So they have a whole team which are again disabled. But when you visit that center, it's in Sindhudurg, entire cashew processing right from the raw kernel to final packaged product is run by a team of disabled, both physical and intellectual. And they're working 8 to 5. It's not that that life isn't easy, and the energy that you feel there and the way they're working, but it requires a team who's set it up and how they're running it. So I think we've seen quite a few examples beyond what we typically, the conventional ones are enough of. I mean, we hear about it, but I think all of us have a larger role to play, not just in terms of giving their opportunity. Do you even have the physical setup to make it possible for them? How are we trained to handle it?
Absolutely.
It's a journey.
Great. And I hope to discover some of these opportunities, some of the enablers as we move along in the work that we do, because this is really a very important journey for making sure that everybody is included. Right. So thank you so much for coming over here, being with us, supporting us now along with looking at the whole youth skilling, but more the persons with disabilities. And we'll keep talking and we'll keep interacting and learning more and more from each other. And I hope to discover a lot of new things that will work. Lovely to have you, and I thank you once again.
Thank you, Pradnya. Thank you to CEED. Looking forward to the current project and more opportunities where we can partner together. Thank you for this time.
Thank you.